Welcome back to the last night of Mountain Time Story Time. We're at the play, so we're going to go straight through. On the night of the pageant, now remember this was 6 months ago, because remember I said that I watched 6 months to see if Imogene's ears would fall off because she got her sister to do it, to pierce her ears. So my wings have kind of shrunk, or either I've outgrown them, one of the two. So anyway, it was now the night of the pageant. We didn't have supper because Mama kind of forgot to fix it, and my daddy kind of didn't expect to have supper anymore between Miss Armstrong's phone calls and all this pageant drama going on. And let's just not forget about regular old life, on top of that. So Daddy said that when it was all over, we were going to go out and get hamburgers. Mama said when it was all over, she was going to go out and hide. We never actually went through the whole thing one time, Mama said. I have no idea what's going to happen tonight. This might be the first night in Christmas pageant history where the wise men and the shepherds beat up each other and Mary runs out with the baby, which is pretty possible too. I kind of wondered what would happen to all of us in the choir and what we should do just in case that does happen. Sure would look pretty dumb for us to stand and sing up there about the Holy Infant if Mary's jetting out the back door with the baby. Come on now. But nothing seemed very different at first that night. There was the usual big mess all over the place, baby angels getting poked with wings, shepherds getting angry because they're stumbling all over their bathrobes, stuff like that. And then the spotlight swoops back and forth every time we do this play. It makes you nauseated. But then, of course, last but not least, whoever sings or whoever plays Away in a Manger on the piano, they pitch it so high we can hardly hear it. Dogs probably can't even hear it. But either way, Daddy always says that us singing Away in a Manger sounds like a closet full of mice. Everything settled down at 7:30. That's when the pageant began. So we're singing Away in a Manger, and the ushers all come in and they lit the candles, and the spotlight comes on to be the star. So you really had to know the words to Away in a Manger because you couldn't see the sheet music in your hand. You couldn't even see Alice Wendleton's little Vaseline eyelids that she worked so hard on. Right. After that, back then we sang 2 verses of O Little Town of Bethlehem. And that's when we're supposed to hum, and then Mary and Joseph come in through the side door. Only they didn't come right away. So we're humming and humming and humming, which is boring and very hard. And after a while, we just sound like an old refrigerator that needs to be retired to the dump. I knew something like this would happen, Alice said. Something like what? They didn't come. They didn't come at all. They just left us all up here. There's no Mary, there's no Joseph. They didn't come. I guess we're just going to keep on humming. That's what I thought back then. What else could we have done? I figured we would just go on humming. But then, Ralph and Imogene shows up. Only for once, they didn't come through the door pushing and shoving each other like they normally did. They just stood there for a minute as if they weren't sure if they were in the right place. Because of the candles, I guess, or maybe because all the people were there in the church this time. But, they kind of look like those people on the 6 o'clock news, those refugees that are being hauled off to an ugly old place and they're surrounded by their bags and everything else. But then, it suddenly occurred to me, maybe this is the way it really was when the Holy Family first came into the barn that night. They were shoved in a barn by people who didn't care hide nor hair about them or what happened to them. They couldn't have been very clean either because it was such a long journey getting there. And then I thought maybe to myself, maybe they look more like this Mary and Joseph. Imogene's veil was all cockeyed as usual. Ralph's hair stuck out all around his ears. And Imogene had the baby doll, but she wasn't carrying it in the way she was supposed to. She had it slung up over her shoulder. Then she goes to birth the baby before she puts him in the manger. I don't think it's very nice for her to birth the baby Jesus if he has colic. Oh my goodness. All this while we're up here in the angel choir in front of the audience. She's over here having a conference about it. I heard Alice gasp, and then she pokes me. You suppose that maybe Jesus could have had colic? Oh, I don't see why not. He could have had colic. He could have been fussy or hungry just like any other baby. After all, that was the whole point of Jesus. He didn't come out of a cloud like somebody out of the Amazing Comics. He came and he was born and lived, just like us, a real person. Right away, we had to sing While Shepherds Watch Your Flocks by Night. And we had to sing very loud because there were more shepherds than there were anything else. And they make so much racket with all their crooks banging around. They sound like a bunch of hockey sticks. Next came Gladys. She comes out from behind the angel choir that night, and she was the only one who had a line, so you know, of course, she's going to make the most of it.
Hey, unto you, a child is born.
So she says it as if it was obviously the best news that anybody could have ever had. We all looked at the shepherds. They're all trembling. They're so afraid, but mostly because of Gladys. But it looked good anyway. Then there came 3 carols about angels, and it took that long to get the angels in because they were primary kids and they got nervous and cried and forgot where they were supposed to go and bent their wings in the door, just stuff like that. We got a little rest when the boys came out and they sang We Three Kings of Orient Are, and everybody in the audience shifted around to watch the wise men march up the aisle. "What have they got?" Alice said. I don't know, but whatever it was obviously heavy because Leroy almost dropped it. He didn't have his frankincense jar either, and Claude and Ollie didn't have anything they were supposed to bring, like the frankincense, the gold, and myrrh. "I knew this would happen," Alice said for the second time. "I bet it's something awful." "Like what?" "Oh, who knows? Probably a burnt offering." You know them, the Herdmans. Well, they did burn things, but they hadn't burned this yet. It was a ham. And right away, I knew where it came from. My dad was on the church charitable works committee, and they gave away food baskets at Christmas time. And this was the Herdman's food basket ham that they had given away that night. It still had the ribbon tied around it that said Merry Christmas. So then, that's when Alice says, "I bet they stole that." They did not. It came out of their food basket for Christmas. But even if the Herdmans didn't like ham, which I'll bet was Alice's next idea, they had never before given away anything in their lives except clumps on the head, so you had to be impressed for that. So Leroy drops the ham in front of the manger, and it looks so funny to see a ham sitting up there where there's supposed to be gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So we sing, "What child is this?" And the wise men are supposed to confer among themselves, and then they leave by a different door so nobody would be confused about them leaving a different way. Well, the Herdmans either forgot that or they didn't want to do that or something, because they didn't confer and they didn't leave. They just sat there, and there wasn't anything anybody could do about it. "Oh, they're ruining the whole thing," Alice says. But they weren't at all. As a matter of fact, it made perfect sense for the wise men to sit down and rest, and I said so to her. They're supposed to have come from a long way, Alice. You don't expect them to show up, hand over the ham and jet, do you? As for ruining the whole thing, it seemed to me that the Herdmans had improved the pageant by a great deal, just by doing what came naturally, like burping the baby, for instance, or thinking a ham would make a much better present than a bunch of perfumed bowls. Usually by this time, we sang Silent Night, and I was so sick of the whole operation I wanted to go home. But on that night, I wanted to stick around and see what else the Herdmans would do and what else they would change. Maybe the wise men would tell Mary about their problem with Herod, or she would tell them to go back and lie their heads off. Or Joseph might go with them and get rid of Herod once and for all. Or Joseph and Mary might even ask the wise men to take the baby Jesus. Nobody would even think to look there for the baby Jesus. I was so busy planning out new ways to save him that I missed the beginning of Silent Night. But it was all right because everybody sang with us, even the congregation. We get to the verses and we sing, "Son of God's love's pure light." And I happened to look at Imogene, and I had almost dropped my hymn book that night on a baby angel. Everyone was waiting for something that the Herdmans would do that would be absolutely unexpected. And sure enough, it happened. Imogene Herdman was crying. In the candlelight, her face was all shiny with tears, and she didn't even bother to wipe them away. She just sat there, old, awful Imogene, in her crookedy veil, crying and crying and crying. Well, it was the best Christmas pageant we had ever had. Everybody had said so. But nobody seemed to know why. And when it was over, people stood around at the lobby of the church talking about what was different this year. There was something special. Everyone said, but they couldn't put their finger on it. Miss Wendelkin said, well, Mary, the mother of Jesus, had a black eye for one. But you can only expect that of a Herdman. She meant that it was the most natural thing for a Herdman to have a black eye, but it really wasn't a black eye at all. Imogene's eye was just swollen and puffy. she had walked into the corner of the choir robe cabinet in kind of a daze, as if she had caught on to the whole idea of God and the wonder of Christmas. And this was the funny thing about it all. For years, I thought about the wonder of Christmas and the mystery of Jesus' birth and never really understood it. But now, because of the Herdmans, it didn't seem so mysterious after all. When Imogene had asked me what the pageant was all about, I told her it was about Jesus. But that was just part of it. It was about a new baby and his mother and dad who were in a lot of trouble, no place to go, no money, no doctor, and nobody knew them. And then they arrive in the East, kind of like my uncle from New Jersey, with some rich friends showing up. But Imogene, I guess, didn't see it that way. Christmas just came all over her all at once, like a case of chills and fever, and she was crying and walking into furniture. Afterward, there were candy canes and little Bibles that night for everybody, and a poinsettia plant for my mom from the whole Sunday school. We put the costumes away and folded the collapsible manger.
Just before we left, my father snuffed out the last of all the tall white candles. "I guess that's everything," he said as we stood at the back of the church. "It's all over now. It was quite a pageant." Then he looked at my mother. "What's that you got?" "It's the ham," she said. "They wouldn't take it back. They wouldn't take any candy either, or any of the little Bibles. But Imogene did ask me for a set of the Bible story pictures, and she took that Mary picture out and said that it was exactly right. Whatever that means." I think it meant that no matter how she herself was, Imogene liked the idea of Mary in the picture. All pink and white and pure looking, as if she never washed the dishes, never cooked supper, or did anything except have Jesus on Christmas Eve. But as far as I'm concerned, Mary's always going to look a lot like Imogene Herdman. Sort of nervous and bewildered, but ready to clobber anyone who laid a hand on her baby. And the wise men are always going to be Leroy and his brother's barren hand. When we came out of the church that night, it was cold and clear, the crunchy snow underfoot, and bright, bright stars overhead. And I thought about the angel of the Lord, Gladys, with her skinny legs and dirty sneakers sticking out from under her robe, yelling at all of us everywhere, "Hey, unto you a child is born."